Hello there, this is Caleb Anderson, and this is my SPED 756 final project that focuses on transition services in Oklahoma. My project focused on the article that you can see here, the special education and related services during the 2020-2021 school year, and the description of transition services during the time of COVID-19. Referring back to IDEA requires that transition planning begins no later than the first individual education program, or IEP, to be in effect when the child turns 16 and updated annually. Oklahoma's special education policy indicates that transition services must be in place for implementation by the beginning of the student's ninth grade year or upon turning age of 16, and specifically whichever one comes first. Transition planning may begin at a younger age if deemed necessary by the IEP team. Several Oklahoma school districts have opted to begin transition planning earlier than required by the student with an IEP. For those who might not know, IDEA defines transition services in Section B, line 300, as a coordinated set of activities for a child with a disability that, 1, is designed to be within a results-oriented process that is focused on improving the academic and functional achievement of the child with a disability to facilitate the child's movement from school to post-school activities, including post-secondary education, vocational education, integrated employment, continuing in adult education, adult services, independent living, or community participation. The second part of this section looks at is that it is based on individual child's needs, taking into account the child's strengths, preferences, and interests. Now, as I've reviewed a little bit of the policy and the law, we are going to move in and describe the policy change that was implemented due to COVID-19. In the document published by the Oklahoma State Department of Education, it lists transition services accommodations to be made via traditional, distance learning, or hybrid learning for the 2020-2021 academic year. The goal is to guide educational agencies to be flexible and to adapt these services that are required to be provided. Some of the guides or guidelines focus that are here posted on the policy description. These include make individual determinations as you plan and provide transition services in person, hybrid, and or virtual. The importance of that we need to be planning ahead to be prepared as the district may move from a variety of teaching models, meaning that maybe a district might start out in person but might be required to move to a hybrid or virtual. So there needs to be a plan to foresee that. They also reiterate the importance of collaboration with school counselors. They also then determined that we need to be following the guidance in the Return to Learn Oklahoma framework, the framework that was published as schools have been returning for the fall, either in the tradition or in-person, hybrid, or virtual learning framework. And then finally is the collaboration with the vocational rehabilitation counselors, that they're another instance that collaboration is needed. To see how this policy and transitional services were implemented since the beginning of the pandemic, I had 3 interviews with various transitional service stakeholders in Oklahoma. These interviewees did allow me to disclose their names for the purpose of only this presentation. Ms. Lori Chestnut works for the Oklahoma Department of Education as a secondary transition specialist. Ms. Judy Goldston works with the Pre-Employment Transition Services with the University of Oklahoma. And finally, Ms. Dallas Clare is a special education teacher here in Oklahoma. Ms. Lori Chestnut is a transition service specialist with the State Department of Education in Oklahoma. I interviewed her regarding the special education and related service document published for the 2020 and 2021 academic year, specifically regarding the transition services and compliance of IDEA during virtual learning. One of the main themes was adaptation of services that were traditionally given in person now moved to virtual or distance platforms. She said, when looking at IDEA and the requirement of community experience, districts said this was the hardest hit because of businesses were closed. Districts and businesses had to adapt by using Zoom tours, and job trainings had to be done with other means such as those virtual Zoom meetings. The State Department expected districts to be at a 100% compliance for transition services regardless of COVID-19. If districts were not compliant, they would be notified to do an IEP review and to make up the goals that were missed. My next interviewee was Judy Goldston. The University of Oklahoma Outreach, through a grant from the Oklahoma Department of Rehabilitation Services, is making available pre-employment transition services, also known as PREEX. These are activities that are offered to high school students with disabilities. Judy Goldston expresses that the pre-employment transition services is not an IEP goal, but they are steps to help achieve the various IEP goals. One of the big benefits of the 130 districts partnering with the University of Oklahoma is that OU is developing and helping to implement some of the action steps required for the IEP goals at no cost to the district. As I mentioned, is that this department from the university is operating under a grant, and that districts can and do partner with the university at no cost. However, when COVID-19 hit and schools quickly went virtual, Goldston said, we quickly had to stop providing services because our services had been designed to be face-to-face. We pulled back for about a month to design our virtual services back in March of 2020. Attendance in the services dropped significantly in March 2020. And in the fall of 2020, participation gradually picked up. However, by January of 2021, participation exploded due to the virtual models created by the University of Oklahoma. The University of Oklahoma also has summer programs that are offering various camps for students to participate in. Going back to what Ms. Lori Chestnut mentioned from the State Department, explained that districts who were non-compliant had to make up these IEP goals. And some are participating in these camps as an action step to fulfill the IEP goals that were missed. I had the opportunity to interview Ms. Dallas Clare, an 8-year special education teacher in the state of Oklahoma. In her interview, we got down to the day-to-day implementation of transition services over the last year. She stated, the parents take the lead a lot. The teacher doesn't give instruction all day in a physical setting. It does look quite a bit different. It looks a lot different. Dallas went into how her instruction now that the days look different online, giving direct instruction to students on budgeting, grocery list, secondary education options, whereas before it was an in-person and could include hands-on activities such as cooking, making dinner for the family. One of the main themes that I gleaned from Miss Claire was the importance of that partnership with the parent, is that while materials may have been sent home or instruction was set up through various Zoom or other virtual meetings, that there had to be that great partnership with the parent to help facilitate some of these these various forms of instruction, and to help to really help implement these, as I said, these various instructions that the student needed. Moving on, we then now look at the critique of the policy that was written, and really more importantly, that implementation that occurred. While the State Department's policy of maintaining compliance during the pandemic obviously had the spirit of the law in mind, there were some obvious pitfalls in its implementation. Firstly, in March of 2020, Ms. Goldston and Ms. Claire allude to that many seniors' services being cut, meaning that students who were seniors about to graduate in a few months, they allude to the fact that sadly some of those students, those services, the district went and focused on different students. This was due to the time taken for the service to be transitioned to an online platform. Secondly, while collaboration with parents is an effective practice, many of the services fell back on them during the past year. Where was the accountability for these students receiving services from the parents? That was one thing that really none of my interviewees talked on, was where there was the greater partnership with parents, but where was that accountability to help ensure that these services were being provided, that they were being provided effectively. And then finally, Ms. Goldston touched on that parents had misinformation or generally not informed of services available to their children during the pandemic. Educators gave general information regarding a few services available to maintain compliance. However, they did not investigate which services or what is available that would best suit the student's IEP goals. Moving forward, many forget that we are still in a worldwide pandemic and many services are still unavailable to our students. My first recommendation would be to look at the accountability placed for parents taking on more responsibility for transition services. As we are in the summer transition between the 2020-2021 school year to the 2021 to 2022 school year, it needs to be ensured that these accountability measures are put in place, and that various districts and even the State Department has policies set up for this. My second recommendation looks at specifically the University of Oklahoma's pre-employment transition service that's available. Many educators are unaware of these free services available to their students. I would recommend the understanding of these services be more readily available to educators in the districts in Oklahoma and the IEP teams. This would allow IEP teams to select services that are better fit for each individual student. As I said, one of the great things that the university is doing is that they have spent several months creating models to help ensure that these services are able to be accessed either virtually in a distance manner or when it comes to in-person, either through social distancing and maybe the limitation of people that can be inside of a building. So it as I said, that recommendation is that these services, these free services that the university offers, this just needs to be more readily available, that understanding for districts who do not partner, who are not partnering up with the university. My last recommendation is the greater accountability for transition services by the State Department. As stated in my interview, there were several students who fell through the cracks in March of 2020. As the State Department representative spoke on, is that they have the plan if districts and IEP teams failed to meet the goals and failed to provide these services. But those accountability measures, instead of doing a reactive measure, how is the State Department being proactive? Now, I do understand the flexibility of the global pandemic, but as I said, I do place it on part of the State Department as they're coming out with saying that 100% compliance, that yes, there needs to be flexibility, but districts are expected to have 100% compliance on their IEPs and with the IDEA. So with that, there does need to be that higher accountability for the State Department. Now, I do want to say that some things the State Department has been doing is that they have created a professional learning community, and that came about later on in the 2020-2021 school year. Lori Chestnut does speak on that. They created that for virtual PD that various districts were a part of, where they could either learn, share, and grow on how they're adapting services being provided. Now, that was a great implementation that the state has been doing, but as I said, this was something that was not instituted until later in the 2020 school year, and really that first semester, since March of 2020 to about the mid of the next school year, there were those communities weren't yet established. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. These are the references I used.